I'm Jonas or Jonasie, and I look at our old tradition of traveling forth and back between Canada. What is Canada and Greenland today? We have been doing that for the last 5,000 years. We have gone forth and back, and now I decide to come back here. And that has been a lot of fun. And as you
Wow.
mentioned, I have been around the world. Oh, hello, Helio. I see that Helio from Brazil is joining the meeting. It has been interesting, and I have been traveling forth and back between Greenland and rest of the world, and I worked up there as an adult, and I have been on both sides of Greenland. Like as you've seen on the pictures, I've been on icebreakers. But you like to hear about my early childhood in Aslusupa, which means the mouth of the fjord. That was a very small community, but when I grew up there, it was the largest town in the world. I mean, they were like living in the middle of New York, so far I was concerned. And the life was amazing there, and it was a tight-knit community. And when I look back at it, all the Inuit in that town, they were giants. I had to look up to them all. They were so big. And it was, we had one trading post, and they had everything you needed. There they had peppermint candy with red stripes. They had chewing gum, and of course you could buy guns for your hunting there. And beside it was the local school. It had two rooms, grade 1 and 2, and grade 3 and 4. And usually when the and you can see on the picture there that over to your right, first one to the far left, that was the local church. It was right across the little bay where I live. And then as you go over to your right, you see the red building. That was a trading post. And then right behind the trading post, that's where I lived. And at one point, we were 7 people living in one room there. And then we had an extra room in the back on the side, and somebody lived in there too. And then further to your right, that yellow building, the last one, that was a public school. And that's all what you need to function. And then what you can see along the beach as you go up, you can see all the blubber that it put on the rocks. It's a way where you make a seal oil for your lamp and for eating. And you would cut the seal blubber out and then put on the cliff with no lichen right along the water. And the sun would break it down, and then when the oil started coming out of it, they were put inside a bag made of and one complete seal. And in that, the oil would separate from the fat, and it had the consistency of olive oil. And they were used either for lamps, or you could use it for dipping your food into it, especially when you were eating dried cod. You would dip in it, and then it was considered a delicacy, and it was used for mixing with food. or even as a lubricant for your guns, because the problem, what is unknown to you, is that some of the gun oil, they would freeze when you use it up in the Arctic, and your gun would be rendered useless. If you use some of the older type of gun oil, it would simply freeze or make it very stiff. But seal oil was very good for as a substitute for it. So it had many uses, the seal oil. And that's how the process was started, was that you, after seal oil, usually in the spring and summer, you would cut it out, you would cut the seal oil out and then put it on the cliff. And as you can see, the cliff are all dark. And it's not like it's old seal oil that's simply darkened from the sun. And it had been used for generations for making seal oil. It's kind of a refinery. It's an Inuit seal oil refinery. And that basically what it is. And then in front of it, that red and white building, that's the trading post. And as I was there, I remember all these giant Inuits, hunters there, they would go in and buy a new gun in there, usually some surplus rifle scrounged for some battlefields that end up for very little money up there. And then they would take it out and walk out to the edge of the water or up on top and try it out. I mean, you can't do that here. You cannot go to a store here and buy your gun and walk out. And they tried it on for accuracy on small floating icebergs, going by on the water. And that was very much part of community life. And here the seal oil refinery here. I have a wonderful memory of looking at it, and up there, the climate is so cold that it doesn't rot, and there were no flies. So the sun's ray could work on it and break it down. I imagine it was the sun's ultraviolet ray that would break it down, and then you can see the oil had been running down along the rocks. And when they did that, there was a time to recover it and put it in sealskin bags so it could continue the refining process. And then when almost all the oil, or most of the oil gotten out of the blubber, it was left like a burgundy colored piece of fat. And that was considered a delicacy. And my grandfather would sit there with his friend, and he would put one on a plate, and they would cut small slices of it and eat it. And that was a real treat. And you couldn't treat your friends better than when they came and visit you, that you gave them some old seal blubber that have been fermented a bit.
That sounds wonderful.
The what?
That sounds wonderful.
Yeah.
Mamaktuk, as we say, delicious. I was wondering if we could ask a question about your childhood, and you mentioned your grandpa. Who else was in your life that was teaching you these things?
I mean, it was simply part of the community that you would learn every day, and the tradition that it was. I grew up in traditional Inuit hunter community, and all what a boy wanted to become when he grew up was a hunter. That there were no other option. you could not imagine you would do anything else than hunting. And you geared up toward that. And in that bag there with the seal oil, you could also put like birds in there, seabirds in there, and they would absorb some of the flavors from it. So it was a delicacy to have, and you would always learn from the elders, from any grown-up, that you would listen to them, and you had a very high respect for them. And I remember one of the kayak hunters, somehow he had lost an arm, but he was still hunting with one arm only, and he was able to operate his kayak with one arm. And we were all impressed of how strong he was, that he could carry this kayak with one arm. And we would watch them that when they come in with a kayak, that how they get out, there was a certain trick to it. They had to squeeze out of the kayak, and they would go right up to the beach. It was an art form that and they could go out very far on the ocean in those kayaks. So that, but you would learn from the elders, and you would learn that to hunt, and you understood the nature, and in this, it was also part of the spiritual life. You would hear about it, and my mother sent me several times to visit an old lady, and she had many stories to tell me, and I always came to her place to listen to her stories. And then I experienced once I came there, she was actually dying, and I was there when she was dying too. And in that small community, you get very close to each other, and you participate in their life all the way through.
Wow, that's so special. And I think the kayaker with one arm really shows how resilient and adaptable Inuit are. You know, it's something you have to do. You have to be able to hunt and provide for your family and community. So he was able to do that, which is really, really cool. I think we want to show.
Yeah, and we would share. We would always share the hunt, and I still do that when I hunt with my hunting partners. I always share with them. Oh, this is the Greenlandic internet before the internet. That's how you got mail, and you can see that in very remote places you didn't have mail service, and in this case the Danish Air Force Catalina, they would fly over town and then drop the mail in parachute. You couldn't send mail out, but you could receive mail that way, and they even dropped some newspapers like that. And I went into the store afterwards to buy a newspaper from that had been airdropped, and they had landed so hard on the rocks that the newspaper was split in half, but they still sold it. So that
like a puzzle piece.
Yeah, and that's something that is special for in the Arctic, that and the places on, like for example, one municipality there in that municipality in eastern Greenland, that Skorpisson I went into. It just one small town with 200-300 people, that municipality has the same size of England, and very few people in there. And that's how they get the mail most of the year, is that the patrolling airplane will fly in and drop the mail. And it was, and one thing that I noticed when I visited people's home there was that the first thing you see is when you go into the door, there always a rifle right up against the wall, and the magazine loaded up the cartridges because there were bears roaming around. So every household had a gun ready because sometime the bears wandered into town and you had to scare them off. And that also that is something different. But they were thriving, and that particular town was actually, there was a little history to that town. It was very remote, but there was some dispute between the Danish and Norwegians, who Norwegian wanted to get back and take over Greenland in the early 1900s, after they became independent from Sweden. And they have owned Greenland before with the Vikings. So they started to settle down in that area. And to counter that, the Danes, the place and community there. I say, no, it's not Norwegian, it's Danish, so, but it's still a very remote community, and the only way you can get your mail, I mean, now they have internet, is that it gets airdropped. And it was that where I saw polar bears when we were sailing in, that where we were followed by a polar bears as we got in, that where I'm going in there. And you can see where the polar bears stand. Our ship has just been going through it, and they closed behind us. And they followed us all the way, the polar bears. And when they got too close, we would use the foghorn and then pull the foghorn, so that would scare them off. None of them ever went on board the ship, but and you can see in front of you the water. That's from the ship's propeller that made that you can see we were pushing through it. And once in a while to get in there, we would get airplanes coming in, like the one that dropped the mail. They would make a map of the ice to find out where there was some openings in the water so we could go through. But it was interesting to see polar bears in a natural environment. And they were fascinating that they would follow us. Yeah, and I guess what attracted them, like any bear, they get attracted to garbage. We would throw garbage from the kitchen, they would throw garbage out on the ice.
So Dad, this is later on in your life now when you were working on the icebreakers up and down the coasts?
Yeah, it was actually a supply ship. It was especially strengthened for ice. And in summertime, it would sail like, especially like in eastern Greenland, where you had all the drifting ice. The problem we had there was that the North Pole and that whole coast would freeze over in winter. And then in summertime, it would break up and drift south. And it became a problem for shipping. So you needed especially ice-breaking supply ships. So we went in with that. And then, of course, in winter, you couldn't go in because the ice got too thick. It was impossible for those small icebreakers to go through this ice. So what they did with those ships was that they went to the South Pole. They were chartered by by the expeditions and companies that work on the South Pole, on the Antarctica. So they would work in Greenland in summertime, and then in wintertime, when it was summer in the Antarctic, they would go down there, and they still do. So that several freighters that use in Greenland in summertime, and they go idle in winter. They are used in the Antarctic for during the winter, because then they have summer down there, because you have that reverse season. And of course, down there you don't have polar bears, but you have polar bears up there. You can see a little bit to the left of the polar bears. I think it's a little bit of paint from our ship that's sitting there. But it was hard work all the way to go through it, and as far as you could see the ice, and that's all what you could see. And that's, I mean, all and then here you have our Siberian dogs. They originated in Siberia. They have found through DNA that all the Greenlandic sled dog originated in Siberia, and they used them there. And in behind them, you can again see the drying of the fish, and you can see how the sun is going through it, and that how you preserve food in Greenland is by drying the fish. And it's used for dog food as well, but it's also for humans. And then the dried fish become very, very hard, and you need a hammer to soften them up, or a big stick, and then you soften them up by hammering them. And then afterward, you can peel it off, and that's where that seal oil comes in. You dip it in seal oil, and then it's easier to eat and chew after that. But and if you take the dried fish and you store that inside a small rock cave near the water, it absorbs the flavor and the flavor of the minerals to the rock, and that's considered a delicacy if you know where to store your dried fish. And it tastes so much better. But it's actually a big export from Greenland is to export dried fish, like to places like Africa. There are a lot of fish around Greenlandic waters, and it has become a significant export product, along with the salted fish. And one of the things I noticed when I sailed in Greenland, that we run into the Portuguese fishermen. They were fishing by hand in small boats, and they had done that for centuries. So it attracted a lot of international fishermen in Greenland. So that's and this is from Ilulissat, that town where those dogs are, and they were fascinating, the dogs. Now they have been chained down. They used to roam the whole town, and they would roam in like they would pack up, and they had a problem with that. They packed up that sometimes attacked children, and they actually killed children too. So they decided it was better to chain them up. So now all the sled dogs are chained up, but they all originated from Siberia. So they came with us all the way from Siberia and all through the Arctic and all the way to eastern Greenland. So they travel around, they can see around 6,000 kilometers and about 10 time zones. So that where the Inuit people are living in. Today they're living in about 8 time zones and about 5,000 kilometers. And we couldn't do it without the dogs. And the dogs was our mode of transportation. The only complaint there's about the dogs from the hunters is that their skin is not waterproof. So if you are stuck on an ice floe and you drift out, you can eat them. But the skins are not very good for making a boat because they leak. So that what are some of the downside of having dogs? That you can't make a boat out of the skins. I mean, you try to look from a practical point of view. But they service the Inuit population very, very well from Siberia, where they originated, and all the way to eastern Greenland. And they're still very much in service today as they were 5,000 years or 10,000 years ago, whenever they started to use sled dogs. And they are totally fascinating.
Yeah, I feel like this conversation is making me both hungry and want a dog. I wish we could sit around and have some country food, some traditional food. It looks so good. What is your favorite food?
My favorite what?
Your favorite traditional food?
It's for me, I think my favorite food was mishi. It was the dried cod. It will be opened up and dried. And then you soften it up with a hammer, fold it over, and you bang on it until it becomes soft. And then you can peel it off. And then you could either, if you had seal oil, you could dip it in seal oil. Or if you didn't have seal oil, you could take margarine. They could substitute well for it and dip it in margarine and eat it. But every part of the fish had a different flavor. That it was not just like one piece, it tastes the same. No, the tail and the inside, and it was a little bit brown. You could peel it off. It was delicious. That was one of my favorite dishes. And another favorite dish was the dried cod liver. No, boiled cod liver mixed with the blackberries that grows on the ground. We call it the barmat. And when you mix that with the boiled cod liver, it was totally delicious. And another really treat I had as a kid was you would take one raw egg and put it in a cup and just put a spoonful sugar in it, and then you could mix it with a fork, and then to mix it together, it almost became white, and then it was delicious. You had a raw egg where you whipped the sugar into it, and it was totally delicious. So
what kind of egg is this?
Or usually they had chicken, or I could get chicken egg where we were. And another delicacy was the dried seal meat. We would, just like with the fish, we would dry the seal meat and hang it up to dry. And it looked like licorice, but it had a different flavor. And it was very, very good. I enjoyed that. And I also enjoy eating whale meat. It was very nice too. And I remember I also have the tongue of a whale that has a very, very nice flavor to it. So we had a lot of very nice delicacies we could eat and enjoy. And that, of course, with the flavors you can get outside the Arctic, you can make all things, but they were strong flavors, they were good flavors, and they were well suited for the climate and the environment we were in. And when you like have your dried fish or dried cod, you put that inside a little rock cave, and so it added some flavors to it, and it was very, very nice.
Awesome.
Or when we went outside and we went for a walk, and we would make a cup of tea out in the wilderness, inside a pot. You pick up some water there and boil it with some twigs you found around, and you have the smoke and everything. It has wonderful flavors to it. And as a boy, for example, very often we would not go home for lunch. We would just go down to the beach. And down in the beach, we have all the mussels. And we always carry a knife. And so we could poke them open, and then we would break them in two. And then we take one side where it wasn't stuck, and then scoop the mussel out with the other half, and then eat it raw. And then we would also eat seaweed. There were two kinds of seaweed we really enjoyed. There was one that was like brown, and another one was green. And they had different flavors, and they taste best just to take them out of the cold Arctic water and take them out, and then eat them right there fresh out of salt water. If you put fresh water in there to get rid of the salt, they didn't taste as good. And those seaweed was considered to be and delicacy as well. And me and my mom, we would go out. I mean, we couldn't buy veggies there or salad. We lived off the ocean, and we would go down to the beach and collect seaweed and mussels, and bring it home for supper or lunch. And she had a pail, we put it in. So there were lots of food there. And then sometimes we would stand and catch fish there from the beach. We had a little fishing line, we would go out and catch fish. And fresh fish, we had what was a delicacy was to eat the skin. You can eat the skin of raw fish, most raw fish. Like halibut is very, very delicious to eat halibut skin.
I think we might have to change. I think we might have to change the subject. I'm getting so hungry.
Okay. And one, especially with halibut, is that when it freezes a bit and then it turns to ice, and you have ice crystals in there. And when you sliced off the skin of an halibut that kind of semi-frozen, you have the ice crystals in there. It became crunchy when you ate it, and it was delicious. The only skin I don't like eating is that didn't care much for is from shark. Because sometimes I had shark, and shark skin is very, very rough. It's not, I don't consider that a delicacy, but especially the halibut or so, that was very, very good. And the same with the seal skin, with seal meat. You could eat that raw in thin slices, especially when it was frozen. You would just cut thin slices off and eat it. and it was totally delicious. And of course, I was talking about when the seal hunter came in. With the seal, we always watched for them out on the ocean when they came back and then to the shore. And then if they had had a successful hunt, they would put the hat on camouflage sail in front of them of a white cloth. So they look like they camouflage themselves like a small piece of ice, and the seal fell for it. And there was a hole in the middle of them where they could shoot. They used to take it down on the paddle, but when they knew we could see them from the village, they would put that sail up so we could all see that they have gotten a seal. So all of our people run down to the beach to greet them when they came back from the hunt, and we will see how they had the one seal tied to the kayak and they paddle in with it, and then they would drag it ashore, and then the wife of the hunter, she would take her ulu out, and she quite often had two, and then she would bang them up against his arm like that. It sounded like a bell, but she was actually sharpening her ulus by going up against his arm like that, but it sounded like a dinner bell. And she would cut strips off the seal from the neck and down, and then she would cut small pieces from that strip and give it to us as a delicacy. And there were hair, skin, and blubber. And we would eat that fresh. And that was a delicacy. And then we would proudly walk up, chewing on that piece of sealskin, the blubber and hair. And then when we met some unlucky boy who hasn't seen the kayak hunter come in, and of course he didn't get that piece of sealskin with blubber on it, he would do this, hey, look at what I got. You didn't get it, did you? And they would be all jealous. And then after a while, when you've been chewing on that sealskin blubber and hair, you would also have chewed up the fat, and then what you had left was the hide and the hair, and we kept chewing on it, and then the hair would come off, and you would go there and spit out all the hair because you couldn't really eat them. And then at the end, you could either swallow the hide or spit it out. That was simply a tradition. And it was delicious. And if you were lucky, after they open up the seal, the first thing they would go after was the liver. It was a total delicacy, that the raw liver. And they would cut slices of it and give it to you too. That was the tastiest part of and freshly caught seal, was to eat the liver. And that was and the entire seal was consumed. There was nothing left that wasn't consumed. And everything from the seal was used. The hide was used for clothing. And sometimes if they didn't cut up, they would cut around it like that and make rope out of it, or strings. And it had many uses. So that's so all these food flavors was actually, there were a lot of good food, and it was well adjusted to the community because they were all local product. Yeah.
Awesome. We thought we would change the subject before people get too hungry. But we wanted to learn a little bit about your carving. So you started carving when you moved to Canada.
Oh
How,
yeah,
how did you get into carving?
I looked at it. See the coming to Canada. I mean, as I say, we have been moving forth and back between what is Canada and Greenland today for 5,000 years at least. And I came back here, and the Greenland is perhaps in many ways the most advanced Inuit society they have. Is very much influenced by the Scandinavian cultures and so on. And there wasn't anything that really was done to promote the culture and the art. And coming to Canada and discovering the Inuit art, I just wanted to be part of it. I was amazed about it. I said, I want to be part of this. And of course, I wanted to be part of the hunting too. I mean, so on one hunting trip, I came upon a soapstone deposit. Actually, the logging company had been building a road and exposed the rock. And that's how I started out, was mining my own stone. And and then I simply went from there. And I found that there was an interest in the Inuit art. I haven't experienced before, like in Greenland. In Greenland, it was more like a souvenir, and then the different Danes that were there, they would bring out one or two pieces home as a memento of their stay. But where in Canada, the Inuit art took a totally entirely different scale. It became Canadiana, that because Canada is such a multicultural society, they needed something they could share in common. And Inuit art was among them. And what could be more Canadian than Inuit art? So that, and I just wanted to be part of it. I was amazed with it. I found it so fascinating that I could jump into it and start. And I truly enjoyed that. And I started on my own. I didn't have any teachers. I used the skills I had from Greenland as a sailor and simply improvised and simply worked from there. And that's how I started out. And then bit by bit, I spread out and to do my artwork. And my old soapstone mine where I found it, I ended up living in a native community near that for a couple of years. And then I learned about the hardship that I had gone through with the residential school and all that. I don't want to get into that, but I said to myself, maybe I can make a difference. So I started to teach them art. There were absolutely no artists there. They never did any art. And I sucked them into the art. And they fell for it. It was a lot of fun to get them going. And it was interesting to go to my old soapstone mine, and we were digging in it to get more stone out for the local natives there in Fraser Canyon, up in Lytton and Sitka. And then we discovered that their people or other people before them had mined it before. We could see ancient cot that were covered in dirt, but we could see that they have actually used it at some point, thousands of years ago, perhaps. And it was wonderful to put that back into use. And I have still several artists I created from that coming from Greenland, discovering the Inuit art importance in Canada and becoming part of it. I was also able to give it to local natives that they would carry on with it. And I have several good artists from there who are still involved in the art. One is Fred Sampson, he's a chief, and that and several others. And it was a lot of fun to see the different talent come up. And the first show I had with him was actually in San Francisco. I had a show with him there, and it was fascinating to take them down for the first show and like giving back from what I have gotten and teaching others to do that. And some funny moment came up there was that when we were on an airplane in Seattle to fly to Seattle to San Francisco, one of the guys, he realized he was trapped on the plane, and then he loudly said, "I can't get out now." And the whole airplane started laughing. It was so funny, and he was fine.
Yeah, could I ask about this particular carving? Someone's asking what type of soapstone it is, and then I was wondering if you could tell us the name and what it's about.
Being so closely associated with water, with the ocean, and the boat was very important for us, and so was the sea goddess. We called her Imapukwa, but the Canadian, her name varies a little bit, and in Canada she's called Setna or Talileo. Her name varies a bit, but she has the same function, and she is the same person. I created that. So it was so important for us to be on a boat. And so I created the theme of Setna or Imapukwa swimming under the umiak. And then her hair, you can see her hair becomes the way. I am the creator of it. It has been copied by Canadian artists, but I created that. And where the sea goddess Imapukwa or Setna swimming under the umiak. And you see we use the umiak for migrations. We move from Siberia and all the way, maybe perhaps over the land, but I don't know. But definitely we moved in the umiak, the boat, skin boat, which are light enough so you can carry up. If you run into ice, you can actually lift it out of the water and put up on the ice and carry on by using a human power. And that was that enabled us to move perhaps 6,000-7,000 kilometers across the Arctic, the circumpolar world. We moved by using that, and we were able to transport everything we needed, and the Danish explorers then renamed the umiak the woman's boat, because it was very often women that would paddle it. And the men would be in the kayak paddling beside it. So when they migrated from one place to another, the woman and the children would go in the umiak, and the hunters would come along in the umiak beside it and use the
Yeah.
kayaks. So
There was
they
a
name it.
question. Oh yeah, there was a question earlier about how many people sit in the kayak, and I think this is good because several women sit in the umiak, and then is it always one person in the kayak?
Most of the time it's only one. I mean, I have seen those stage photos where you put 25 people in a kayak and so on, but they're more like unusual. Most of the time it's one, and then in Alaska they had 2 or 3, maybe even 4 people, but they all sat up. So in an emergency, you can carry 1 or 2 person in it. But usually when you migrated, the Inuit hunter would use his kayak, and the women would use the umiak with all the children, and then they would travel together. And that's how they usually moved. And then I'm also a very spiritual person, and then I came up, I could see that the sea goddess, whom we call Imma, she would be under the boat protecting us. She was our protector. And of course, and then I made her hair being the waves around the umiak.
Yeah, I had a
mean,
question. Oh yeah, just a question about what inspires your work. I know I'm not like a art critic myself or anything, but I've heard that your work is often inspired by religion or kind of the mixing together of Western and Inuit.
Or it's the how you connect up with spiritual worlds. I mean, as in my early childhood, when we could start talking about some of the first thing that spiritually affected me was the Northern Light. I mean, we didn't have internet or television or even electricity in Ashur-Subba, where I had my early years. That the Northern Light was stunning there, and there were many stories about the Northern Light. And as a children, we would go out and look at the artwork created by the ice. You know, in the little dried out ponds, they were not very big, but there would be like a piece of glass covering them with ice. And that ice underneath it have all kinds of patterns. That was our artwork. I mean, they were beautiful. We would find one to the other and look at them, and they were stunning. There were artwork around us everywhere where we worked, where we walked as a kid, especially in winter. You have the ice crystals, and you have the drifting icebergs, or you had the fog, you had the non-light. You were not allowed to whistle when there was a non-light. If you whistled, you could lose your head. And up in the non-light, they would play with your head, so you were not allowed to whistle, so you never did that. But we were very we were very spiritual. And I was able to take that spirituality and use in my work. And I love taking that spirituality as I mentioned to you here in British Columbia. I found, my book gonna come out about it, is the perhaps world's largest astronomical observatory that had been lost for 3,000 years. I found that through my spirituality, you can sense it, you can feel it. When you are there, it's there. And you sense it, it becomes part of you. And the same when you do your art, you go out, and then that's how it simply comes out of you when you work with your art. And you can start doing, you can have your days where you, for some reason, are in bad mood, but you start doing your art, it cleans your mind. It flows out of you and it creates you. And when you're done, you feel wonderful. It's a wonderful therapy, is to do art. And you find inspiration within your own heart, your own mind, the way you look. And of course, when you have stories from your childhood and the ancient stories like with Setna and all the beings that are part of our spirituality, and they are with me. You cannot see them, but for some reason the dog can see it. And I have I know Emily and the neighbor, they know I scare the wish out of dogs. No, it's not me, it's my spirit they're afraid of. When they see my helping spirit, they freak out and run away. And they think they're gonna be eaten or something. But it's you always have your helping spirit with you, and they protect you. And you will put that into your art. Of course, with the introduction of Christianity, they try to eradicate it, but it hasn't been possible. It's so ingrained that basically we will be Christians on Sundays, and the rest of the week we're heathens. So that and that reflects my work. Is my spirituality. And I used it to find this world's largest astronomical observatory, and it's gonna come out, it covers several thousand acres, and there were a lot of spirits there, and they spoke to me, and they're stunning. And that's what I use in my art, is my spirituality.
I'm wondering, for the sake of time, if we could move on to the hunting section. Yeah, I just want to say too, like, it's so inspiring to hear about your art and just how it comes from within. A lot of people don't create their own art because they think it won't be that good or they'll never become experts, but it's important to create art just for the sake of creating. And I think you've shown that, so that's awesome.
And one thing I just
I
want to know.
thought about 30 or so artists, local, so they encampment people.
Yeah. I'm about to switch the slides, and I accidentally did it earlier, but just so you know, it does feature hunting, and I'm sure that this audience is probably fine with that if they're here, but just so everyone's aware.
A good trigger warning. Yes.
Other than that, that's I hunted everything from I hunted polar bears in Greenland, and and a lot of seabirds and seals. And in Canada, I hunted moose, elk, deer, birds, and the biggest I got was a bison. And you can only it's simply so ingrained in me to be a hunter that I don't know what else I would do if I didn't hunt for my food. I grew up in my Aslusuba and Nasak, and you hunted for food. It was a normal thing to do. And I grew up with that ingrained into me. I had to be a hunter. And coming to British Columbia was the mecca for all hunters. It's you have to go to the plains of Africa to get any better hunt than we have here in British Columbia. And in regard to the bison, you can only hunt them on lottery. And it took me 25 years to get a lottery tag for it. And the way they became that we can hunt bison in British Columbia is that there was a rancher up in British Columbia. In 1971, he brought in 49 bisons for breeding, and they broke loose and they ran out in the wilderness of British Columbia. And they have now multiplied their upward 3,000 of those now. They started out with 49, and they're doing very, very well in the winter. They're well suited for surviving, and there are big herds of them up there now. But they only allow a very, very small number of them to be hunted. So for 25 years, I put in my lottery draw in, and then finally I got it. And it was, so I went up there with one Indian chief, the guy Dunstan, and then my British hunting student. He was a British immigrant, Jim. And so we went up together. So there was one Greenlandic Inuit and one local Indian. We went up together and hunted for a bison. And we actually found it in one day. And it took us 2 days to get it out. It was about 1,500 pounds. So it was a big one. So it was fascinating to hunt. But
Yeah.
yeah.
Oh, that was my question, I think, was what is the most difficult hunt you've had? And it sounds like that was pretty difficult, especially taking it all home afterwards.
I would say every hunt is a challenge. When it doesn't matter what you hunt, but you have to understand the behavior. I studied bison behavior where they were for months. From the moment I got my lottery draw till I went out, and maybe as 6 months went by, there wasn't a day I wasn't thinking of it, how to get it. I studied everything I could about it. And then I went in there. I had a good idea where to get them. So every hunt is difficult, and every hunt is basically a fair chase. They have a very good chance to get away from you, and you have to use your senses to hunt. And when you hunt, you become a wild animal. You know, you are human, but mentally you become a predatory animal. Look at the placement of your eyes here. We have the predatory animal's eyes. They sit here in front so we can measure the distance. You have to watch for the wind. You cannot make noise. For example, when I spotted that bison, I told my Indian and British hunting partner, we stay inside the forest. We had to sneak inside the tree line because I learned that with bison, they can see a man on a horse 1.5 miles away. And they will take off. They have a very, very keen eyesight. But staying inside the timberline, I acted like other animals. They do the same trick. They just stay inside the timberline so you can't see them. And that way I was able to get close enough to it to watch it. and pick one out. And any hunt are demanding in itself. And most people, they start out, they can't hunt, they can't see. There's something you have to learn. You have to use your senses. You have to learn you have to use the wind in your favor. And once I was in some open country, I saw a herd of deer, and I could see there was a nice buck in there I like to get, but I was too far away for a shot to get close to it. So I decided to trick them. So I went out in the open, and I walked as it was not hunting. I was just walking in a different direction, and then I slowly got closer to them. But I didn't try to hide. And I just want them to know I was there. And they all look at me and say, what is that guy doing? And then finally I got close enough to them, and then I got that buck. And you have to use that. And that hunting for you of wild animals, that the sense of smell is like that of a bloodhound. The hearing, I mean, you have to buy electronic hearing equipment to get near what they can hear. Sometimes I think they can hear your heartbeat. That's the sense I get from them, because I watch them and I know the wind is in my favor. They shouldn't smell me, but I make them nervous. And I'm wondering if they can hear my heartbeat, or if I look at them. You all know, if you stare at another person in the bus or wherever you are, in subway, that person can feel and sense your eyes, and they will suddenly turn around and look right at you. And you say, oh my God, they found out looking at them. Animals are the same way. You look too long at an animal on a distance, they become nervous. You can see them, they start standing there, something wrong here. And then suddenly they take off. They can sense that. So when you spot a game, you don't stare too long at it. If you stare too long at it, it takes off. And all these things, you have to play with that. And it's fascinating. And of course, one of the most stunning hunting I have seen, I have not experienced that myself, is to hunt seal from a blowhole. That would be something. And what makes that hunt possible is the harpoon tip they're using, the truckle harpoon. It's at least 7,000 years old hunting tool, but the tip of a truckle harpoon, the line goes to it. So the moment you put a thrust into the seal, to the blowhole, and you pull the string, the harpoon tip goes from a spear tip to a hook. It goes the other way, so the seal can get away. That is why we survive in the Arctic, is because of that long ago invention, at least 7,000 years ago, the truckle harpoon. That makes us able to, when we thrust it into a seal, to a blowhole, and we pull the line, then it turns to a hook, and we pull the seal out of the ice. That made us survive in the Arctic. That single tool, that single hunting tool, was the one that made us live and survive in the Arctic. I don't know if we fled warfare or trouble, and by the human trouble. When we moved to the Arctic, we were safe, but it was difficult to survive in the Arctic. You had to use your hunting skills, and then somebody one of us came up with that chocolate harpoon because it's easy enough to hit a seal to a seal hole with a harpoon and it will die, but you will lose it. It will swim away. Before it dies and bleed out, it's gone and you won't get the nourishment from it. You need to hold it. And then somebody 10,000 years ago came up with this idea. Why don't we make a tackle harpoon? And even when I was a kid, they were still using it. I mean, in every kayak, they had the tackle harpoon, and then they used the throwing spear. They would put the throwing spear so they all had a throwing spear. And that is older than the bow and arrow. We still use it. And how old it is, 10,000 or more years ago, but every kayak had it. When a kayak went out, you always had a harpoon. And even if they use a gun, they quickly, after they shot it, they put the tackle harpoon in it, and then they pulled the line, and so it wouldn't sink. The problem with seal is that seals are not buoyant. So if they don't swim, they sink. So after you catch the seal, you had to be very, very quick to keep it. You had to catch it. Otherwise, I mean, you can shoot it or you can harpoon it. But if you don't have a tackle harpoon that holds it, it'll disappear and go down to Setna and she eats it. So that it's a fascinating invention that enabled us to live all across the circumpolar world and on the ice where nobody else can live. We are the only people who could live there. And that what enabled us to live was the tackle harpoon. And that turned it in from a spear tip to a hook by pulling the string after you got it.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Wow. It's really cool to hear about how innovative Inuit are. Really, really cool. I had one final question, and then I think we'll open it up to questions from the audience, if that's okay.
Okay.
Yeah, I guess my final question would be about mentoring. If you're mentoring anybody now in your carving or hunting, perhaps family or others, because you have so much to share. So, yeah.
Oh, my pleasure. It's a lot of fun.
Yeah, I don't know. I think Emily might want to go on a hunt sometime soon. Do you mentor other people or teach other people how to hunt?
I tell you, I taught two women among others. I taught several guys. That British immigrant, I taught him to hunt. I took him along on a bison hunt. But I also taught two women to hunt, and that was fascinating. And what I learned from women or female hunters to take them out, they never hunted a day in their lives. They are as good as men. They have hunted so long, it imprinted in their brain how to hunt. And I managed to pull that out of them. And I found those two women hunters I taught, they are as good as any man. They are totally into it. And that's something new I learned because I only hunted the guys, but it told me that women have hunted. And the same with my daughter Mabel here, she hunted too. That it fascinated me, and I taught several new hunters that came with me, and they are great hunters today on their own, and I'm very proud of that. And they are totally, they become totally part of it, of the hunting. That they come out I basically turn them into predatory animals, and it's in them. They just don't know it. And I can pull that out of them and make them hunt. And they are hooked for life. And they go out every hunting season. They can't get enough of it. It's simply part of human nature that we have suppressed, and it comes out of you. And it's a pleasure to tell others how to hunt.
Yeah, yeah. Wow, I think you've mentored all of us tonight too. Like we've all learned so much. So Jonasie, thank you. Yeah, there are a couple questions in the chat. If I could ask those to you, and then if people want to speak, they can raise their hand. There's like a little raise hand function if you want to use that, or just raise your hand. And just if you are asking a question, you might come up in the recording. So if you don't want to be recorded, you can just ask it in the chat. But a question we have is from Natalie. I'd love to know if or how hunting has influenced your carvings.
The what?
Has hunting influenced your carvings?
Or hunting gets into my carving. Of course it does. So that it's sometimes the problem. Yeah, it does. It very much part of me. I am a hunter. What my wife told me is that there's only 2 seasons for you. It's a hunting season, and get ready for the hunting season. And of course, it influenced my work.
Awesome. Yeah, that's a fun joke. Only 2 seasons. And what season do you carve in?
What?
Do you carve? What season do you carve in, or do you carve all year round?
I have basically carved all year round, and that it's. And lately, I've been doing a lot of writing. I mean, I have a book coming out here this year about my discoveries of the astronomical observatory, and that in itself, I had to use all my senses as a hunter, as an Inuit, as my spirituality to make it work. But I'm always hunting. I'm in my mind, or I go out, I watch game, and it's fascinating that to interact with wild animals. Whenever I have a chance, I go out and watch wildlife.
Mm-hmm.
And it's stunning.
Mm-hmm. There's another hunter / artist in the chat. I'm not sure if you're able to see the chat, but there are a lot of people also expressing gratitude. Natasha, Lindsay, Nowlook are saying thank you so much, and Isabel as well. There are a lot of Labrador Inuit, Nunaat here, which is cool. But a question we have from Angie is they're saying that I'm an Ojibwe bow hunter here in Ontario. So thank you for some of your tips. It was really cool. And they say they're also an artist, but they get attached to their art. So how do you let it go? Like when you sell a piece or bring it to a gallery, how do you part with it peacefully?
I never part with it. It's simply, it's a pleasure to share it. It's totally a pleasure. I mean, it's a bridge between the Inuit culture and their culture. And they are supporting us to let our culture survive, to buying our art. It's a very important, they're doing a very important function, is to preserving our culture by buying our art, by displaying it. It's very important for our survival as a culture that they appreciate it so much that they're supporting of. I'm grateful for the collector. I love the interaction with the collector of my art because they're supporting me to do what I love to do. And it's a two-way street. It goes both ways. When they come, I have never any problem with it. Sometimes I have a little bit. I would admit that. But then I usually up the price a little bit more.
That's very smart. I like that advice. Now like, oh.
Okay.
Yeah, now.
Go ahead. You go ahead.
Naluk is asking if you've ever seen a wolf up close. I know it's one of Naluk's favorite animals.
I didn't get that, but I have, yeah, and they're stunning. I found that couple of things about wolf is the first thing is the sheer size of them. I cannot believe how big they are. That is stunning. I must have been within 5 meters, the closest I have been to one in the wild. And I was actually sitting in the car and my hunting buddy was driving. And it was winter, we were on a winter hunt. It was standing beside the road, just looking at us. The head was down, it just looked straight at us. It didn't move. And it was within 5 meters and it didn't move. It was stunning, absolutely stunning. The what? Oh yeah, see, then my wife is mentioning that. So the one I saw in the Jasper National Park was that I came into town and on my right-hand side along the railroad, there's some trees there. And there was one standing there and just looking at me. So I decided after I came to investigate what was there. And then when I came there, I found a huge burial ground. And part of Jasper built on top of a burial ground, ancient one. So I researched, I recognized it as such, and then I called archaeologists and the parks and all that stuff, but they like to deny the existence of it. And I felt that spiritually, the wolf or whoever was in the wolf wanted to connect with me and tell me, our burial ground are in danger here. And the wolf was standing on top of the burial ground and looking at me. And it wanted my attention. He knew who I was. I put some attention to that burial ground that nobody really cared about. And after I showed it to the local newspaper so they could see that what it was, and it was slated for some development and some construction, and so far it hasn't happened. And it was because of that wolf. So it was an interesting encounter. But they don't move, they just look at you. They just like offer the head down and they look at you like that. And it just the size of a wild wolf it's stunning. I see many coyotes and they're small. They're like a small dog, but they're the size of a bear. I mean, they are so big, the wolf. And that I never get over the size of a wolf because they're so big.
Hey, Dad, something we didn't get to cover too much in this, but you might maybe want to talk about a little bit is, do you want to tell the audience a little bit about some of the world travels you went on when you were a sailor?
Oh, yeah, I've been in 35 countries as a sailor. And it's interesting and sometimes scary. I got stuck around the Cuban Missile Crisis. That was scary to be stuck down there. They were talking about starting a nuclear war back then. But I've been around the world. I truly enjoy South America, especially Brazil. Is a wonderful place to visit, and it's so vibrant. I love it. It's such a vibrant country, Brazil. I enjoy it, and it was fascinating. I enjoy my time in Africa, like I was in Nigeria. It was interesting, and I was in North Africa, like I got caught up in the Algerian Liberation War from the French, and they were fighting when I was there. And I enjoyed one young Arab there. I talked to him, and then he pulled me aside, and then he dipped into his pocket, and then he showed me the future Algerian flag. He was so proud of it, that they had their own flag. They were going to be independent, and he showed me. He held it in the palm of his hand, and it was one of these fascinating experiences. He was so proud and so happy of it. And that was stunning. And I've been to the Soviet Union as a sailor, and that was interesting to be in the Soviet Union. I enjoyed that. And it was fascinating to have been in a country that doesn't exist anymore. And the same, I was in Yugoslavia. It's gone. I've been through the Suez Canal, and I've been to Australia. And then from Australia going to Japan with some highly refined oil. You started to run into a war between the Dutch and the Indonesian. We thought they had long settled their issues, but there were still some land claim issues there. And they fought it out. And we had to put light on the ship at night to show it was a Danish ship. We were trying to tell them, we don't really care who's winning or losing here. Just leave us alone, okay? We don't want to be collateral damage. So you get to see the world from the good to the bad. You get to see the humanity. And you realize how lucky we are here. And there are a lot of interesting places around in the world. And I was lucky that as a 14, 15-year-old to start to go out and see it. And it was fascinating to sail around the world. And I also spent a lot of time in the Arctic waters. I choose to go on ships that sail in Greenlandic waters. And I enjoyed that, to get to know it. on both sides of the coast and through the Atlantic, and it was interesting to see the world. You learn to communicate with people from around the world, and I truly enjoyed the Latino culture. I really enjoyed. I love the food. I discovered something like arroz con pollo or pescado veracruzana, almost as good as Inuit food.
We've got to change the subject again. I'm so hungry. I also love arroz con pollo. Yum. We do have one more question from Rob. He's wondering where your favorite hunt was and what you were hunting.
What?
Where was your favorite hunt, and what did you
I would
hunt?
say all my hunt are favorite hunt. I don't have any particular hunt. I enjoy taking my friends out. We always hunt together, but often you hunt with friends or family and you go out. It's usually a gathering. You prepare for it for months. I mean, I'm already preparing my hunt with my hunting partners. I'm already started. We're not going out until September, but I'm getting ready for it. If I'm researching the area. See, I go into the areas where I want to hunt. I go there in winter to see where the tracks are. Then I know that's where they will be. I found that they like a funnel. There's certain areas that they prefer than others. And the snow tells me that when I go in and look at the footprint in the snow, I know where they're gonna be. And that's so I just don't go out when the hunting season. I go out all year round. And I also hunt with an Inuit friend here, Henry, and we hunt together here. So we get to speak some Inuktitut when we hunt here. So that's wonderful that we hunt together. At some time I also hunted the local natives, but it's always special when I go out with my Inuit hunting friend and we go hunting together. It's great. But hunting is a culture, and every hunt is a wonderful hunt. Even if you don't have to go out there to kill something, no, you just connect up with nature, connect with the animals, see how they behave. And there are all kinds of games. I watched the ospreys, the eagles. I watched all kinds of ducks. And here I even we got snakes here. And that's interesting to see too, and turtles. And it's so rich in game here that I'm hunting every week. I'm out just watching them, just seeing them. And I like to go and find out where they are, and just to connect up with them. So that I do that all year round. And that's the best thing I can do, is just to go out. And then more often than not, this time I bring my camera along. So, and remember, I use my camera so much that here we have some rules here that they have life for deer in the box. They have to be of a certain size, and they have to have so many points in the antlers. And I was taking pictures of one, and suddenly I realized, oh my God, this one is legal. So I had to put the camera down and take my gun up. But I had a picture of it. So
That's so funny. Yeah.
So that
Um,
it's a year-round thing, and some of my hunting partners I have hunted with together for over 40 years. 40 years,
mhm.
yeah. And we still go out together. And that's it's fascinating just to be close to the animals and be out among the animals. I couldn't be in better company.
Yeah, I really like that. Thank
Yeah,
you. I like what you said about the hunting not just being about actually getting the animal, but observing them and being out in nature with your friends. My dad is not a hunter, but he's gotten really into photography, and he'll go out on his kayak and sit on the marsh for hours just looking at these tiny little birds. And like, I really
yeah,
understand that kind of predatory instinct to want to watch and observe
yeah.
nature. Really cool. Um, so I think we will wrap this up in a couple minutes. I'm gonna do like a official ending for the recording, but then I thought I would open the floor up to anybody that wants to say thank you or something. I attended a workshop yesterday, and they called it questions, reflections, and gratitude, which I thought was really nice. So I don't know if anybody wants to say hi, but first I will just finish off the recording so I can press stop on that. So Meek, thank you so much. Jonasie, this was absolutely wonderful. I think every single person here learned so much, and we're so grateful. There are so many teachings that we can see that are similar to Canadian Inuit and Greenland. Kalaallit, I think. Of course, borders are colonial. You know, we are all one people, so it's really, really cool to see all the connections we have. So thank you. I'm gonna press stop on the recording now.